Hi, I'm sorry I don't speak Danish. I'm trying. It's a very difficult language for someone who's been speaking English their whole life. So thank you for inviting me here to talk about things I'm involved with in both Hollywood and in new technologies in media. I'm going to start with just a little 30-second introduction to my career so you have some kind of background of what I am, what I've done and who I am. So let's just do that, Shannon.
Brett's so far ahead of the field when it comes to these technologies and where we're all going. This is his territory.
He knows all of what's happening now, plus all what's going to be happening for the next 100 years.
Brett set such a nice collaborative and open relationship going in the past.
So last 25 years I've been making feature films in Hollywood, but my beginning was a little bit different than most. I came from a place called Toledo, Ohio, and I landed in Northern California when I first went to California when I was about my son's age here, about 20 years old. And I landed in a place called Santa Cruz, which was the place all the people from Silicon Valley that were starting to create this computer and digital revolution would go to party, would go to have coffee, would go to hang out. And so I landed there, and I landed in a group of people that included Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a man named Jaron Lanier, who actually coined the term virtual reality and had the first company that did virtual reality. So I was able very early to see a lot of these innovations that were happening because I was just hanging out in that group of people. So it was just very by serendipity that I became involved in this kind of digital revolution because that's where I landed from Ohio, which is very much not a place where digital revolution takes place at all. So that started me on my path. And when it came time for me to make my first big feature film, I had seen this idea called virtual reality in its very nascent stage, very early form. And it was very rough. It was very, blocky, chunky visuals. It didn't have a lot of quality to it, but I sensed that this was something that eventually would be able to change the world. And so I decided to make a movie about it that used the term virtual reality and also would talk about it and sort of deal with some of the issues around the idea of virtual reality coming into culture. And that movie was The Lawnmower Man, which was based on a Stephen King short story that had nothing to do with virtual reality at all. So I kind of grafted these ideas onto this other story, and that film became the #1 independent film hit of that year, and it popularized this concept of virtual reality to the world audiences. Many of the people now, 20 years later, who are starting to build this industry, like a man named Palmer Luckey. Some of you may have heard of the company Oculus. They got $2 billion from Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, which really started off this new era of virtual reality technology. He came out in the press and said that my film was his inspiration. So that gave me this very unique entree into this world. And many of the people that are actually creating real virtual reality industry right now were originally stimulated by watching a couple of the movies I made about it, because I also made a film called Virtuosity that introduced Russell Crowe to American audiences and was also about virtual reality. Matter of fact, Russell in his first role there played a virtual character, someone who was not real but was from virtual reality, a villain. So I've been part of the Hollywood establishment for about 25 years, but the truth is I'm kind of an inside outsider because I've always had a foot firmly planted in the Silicon Valley, Northern California area and Hollywood. And I believe that now there's a tremendous disruption happening in Hollywood. Basically, Hollywood 1.0 is over. It's the golden era of of the movie industry is gone. Doesn't even exist anymore. As a matter of fact, they're now making one kind of movie. That's it, the studios. And so there's essentially a paucity of imagination going on in the context of the traditional medium of feature film. Feature film has become a spectacle sport. Now there's, of course, wonderful independent feature film all over the world, and that still, luckily for me, keeps cinema alive. But the Hollywood industry has become very, very focused on one kind of superhero movie. And so there is, right as this is happening, sort of the death of Hollywood 1.0, there's a Hollywood 2.0 that's starting to rise from the ashes. And that has to do with these new mediums. And one of these new mediums is virtual reality and what's called augmented reality. Again, I don't know how many of you have studied this or know what's going on with it at all, but billions and billions of dollars are going into this new industry to create the technology that will actually create it as something that many people all over the world can experience. All of the consumer electronic giants are jumping in and creating headsets. Have you all seen the headsets, the VR headsets? Have any of you tried VR at all? None of you. Okay. So we're still in this nascent stage where there's a lot of hype and a lot of interest in this thing, but very few have actually tried it. And I will tell you that I've been trying and looking at virtual reality now for over 25 years. Right now, for the first time, virtual technology has gotten to the point where it actually has a true power to it, where it actually is compelling enough to be something that can grab the imaginations of the global audience. There's Oculus has a prototype which is extremely effective. So does Valve, a company called Valve, HTC Vive, and then there's Samsung. And Samsung has created with Oculus something called the Samsung Gear VR. And Samsung Gear VR has been the thing that's sold more than anything right now. It's basically you use your mobile phone and connect it into this headset, and the mobile phone, because it's a 4K display, is able to display virtual reality to you. And so that's going to be the way that VR gets out there to the masses sooner than these other forms, which are much more expensive. The Oculus Rift is a very expensive device, so is the HTC Vive. The Sony Morpheus is about to come out, connected to the Sony PlayStation 4 VR. So all of these consumer electronics companies and entertainment companies are putting virtual reality at the center of what their expansion is in the future. They are seeing this as the medium, which is going to essentially take over as an entertainment medium, and also as a medium which is a front-end interface to almost everything that you can imagine. It's not just for entertainment. It's going to be for use in medical technologies. It's going to be for use in just being able to communicate with each other, being able to have virtual travel. And so it's an extremely powerful medium because some neurological researchers have done research on this, and it literally changes your brain chemistry. It changes your neuronic pathways when you're seeing virtual reality, more so than real reality does, because it hits you so quick, so intensely with these displays. So for children, as an example, we're going to be hardwiring their neuronic pathways and changing their brain chemistry with this medium that's about to become ubiquitous over the next 5 years. So, getting back to me as a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories that deal with the issues of these things. Although my stories have popularized the idea and in some ways glamorized it, all the stories I've told thus far about it are cautionary tales. Because this is a very powerful medium that needs an ethical framework in order for it to be positive in the world, especially for children. It is the most powerful medium to ever come along. And imagine Hollywood right now, with all of its technological sophistication, jumping in and becoming whole in a moment with all this money in it, but no one has made any content yet. That's what's happening with virtual reality right now. There's all this technology, all this focus, all this money going to it, and no one is really creating the content. So myself and others are starting to create content companies. I just formed a content company with Scott Ross, who ran ILM and Lucasfilm for George Lucas and was the co-creator and co-founder of Digital Domain with James Cameron. We've just created a company called Virtuosity Entertainment, which is going to be a premier company for making kind of the Pixar of VR, to make content that really is endemic and organic to this new medium, because that's what it is. One of the things about Hollywood 1.0 is they see new technologies as a gimmick, as something to use to promote what they already do. So they're kind of jumping in. You'll notice that all the movie studios now have VR divisions. The people that run these VR divisions have no idea what they're doing and really don't understand the medium at all, because it's just very, very new, but it's the hot new thing, so everybody wants to be a part of it. So they're jumping in and they're doing things that are connected to their feature films and kind of as a promotional gimmick or tool. That's how they see it. The truth is, this is a totally new medium of storytelling, a totally new medium of what we would call actually story worlding. Because you're not just going into an environment and having a linear story told, you're becoming part of that story. You're going to be interactive with that story and with those characters. And that kind of interactive, immersive storytelling is the thing that I'm most interested in with our company Virtuosity, and not this first phase of VR, which is really kind of a gimmicky phase where there's a lot of things like 360 video, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, because we actually just did a music video with Claes that uses 360 video, because that's the state of the art with getting absorption of images for virtual reality now. That's changing very, very rapidly. Over the next 2 years, the technological curve is going to be a hockey stick. It's going to be a J curve that goes very, very fast and brings in a lot of technological enablements that will allow us to have the participants in a story world be able to interact with characters, AI characters, characters that are programmed with the emotions of actors, but are AI and independent. There's also a technology called eye interaction. Eye interaction technology involves eye tracking, which shows exactly what your eyeball is doing. It's very miniaturized now, and we can put them in the headsets. It also can read your intention, because the eyes basically tell us a lot about what someone's thoughts are, what their focus is, what their intention is, and even what their emotions are. This technology of eye interaction, there's a company called iFluence that we're working with, and their demo is one of the creepiest things I've ever done, because basically it's a technology that starts to read your mind. So you take this technology, put it into a virtual reality headset, have that data from your intention of your eye movement going to an AI character, and now you've got characters that know how you're feeling, that know what your intention is, that know where your focus is, and they can interact with you based around that data. Now we're starting to get into having true agency as participants in a story world, as opposed to just watching a movie or watching a story unfold. So this idea of gameplay, a lot of the people that are jumping into virtual reality initially are going to be people that come from the gaming world, and a lot of the companies that are jumping into this are from the gaming world. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Turn my phone off. So there's gameplay on one side, and then there's narrative storytelling on another. In the middle is this gray area, this undiscovered country of interactive storytelling. And interactive storytelling, no one knows what the rules are. No one's actually ever done it. So for me, what's exciting is that this is a new medium that we actually are defining the rules for the first time. I'm a kind of a Hollywood historian, and I love the old days of cinema, where, you know, the Lumiere brothers created cinema, then Edison ripped it off, then it came to Hollywood, and in the early 1900s they were able to start to play with these genres to make what is a comedy, what is a drama, how do you create suspense. Alfred Hitchcock created the rhetoric, the visual rhetoric of suspense, one of the first people to do that. We're at that moment now. I always wished I had been back in time at the beginning of cinema, because that was such an exciting time to be able to create a new art form, a new medium. Now with virtual reality, we're starting to do the same thing. Another thing about VR is that it's going to be actually leading to another technology called AR, or augmented reality. And the truth is, eventually everything will be augmented reality, not VR. Augmented reality means the box on your face goes away, and you're actually able to see everything here. But an overlay can be created so that you have an artificial reality and a real reality simultaneously in your field of view. And you're able to interact with that artificial reality because of the way in which the AR technology reads your movements and reads your eyes and everything else. There's a company called Magic Leap. I don't know if any of you have heard that. That's something you should look into. Magic Leap has got a $5 billion valuation. They've raised over $1.7 billion, 1.7 billion US, and they don't even have a product yet. This shows you how crazy the hype is around these technologies, because people see that it's going to be the entire new interface to another world of being able for us to connect and essentially merge with our media technology. Now, we're already doing that with these smartphones. 7 years ago, the smartphones were very new. Look what's happened in just a very small amount of time. Our entire behavior is changed based upon our digital devices that we hold in our pockets. What's going to happen when our behavior changes based upon the fact that we can be in a completely created media environment and suddenly be there and be able to control it, connect to people around the world? It changes human behavior, it changes the nature of human communication fundamentally. At the same time that we're also going to be creating things that are entertaining. So it's really goes beyond this idea of entertainment. I think that one of the aspects of Hollywood 2.0 is that when these technologies come in, one of the things we must be aware of is to not make the mistake we made at the beginning of Hollywood 1.0, which is that it's not important. The idea that it's not important, that it's just entertainment, that it doesn't have any effect on people, on their lives, or on global culture. The truth is, cinema has had a tremendous effect on people and a tremendous effect on global culture. These technologies are going to have a tremendous effect on literally the physiology of the human being. There's a man named Ray Kurzweil who wrote a book called The Singularity, which is around the idea of transhumanism, about us merging with our technologies. In some ways, virtual reality is one of the harbingers of that era, of us merging with our media itself, so that our media reality and what we think of as reality become one, become connected in a way that's almost impossible for us to imagine right now. So one of the aspects of this, in order for us to get to the point where we are able to have a virtual reality that we can navigate through, that we can interact with, is the idea of being able to absorb the visual environment at a different level than cameras are allowed to. Now, right now, 360-degree cameras are being used in order to create what's called VR content. Are any of you familiar with 360-degree cameras? Do you know what I'm talking about with that? Okay. So that's just basically a number of video cameras, high-res video cameras, HD, looking in all different directions, sometimes up to 24, sometimes 7, sometimes 3. It's many different configurations. There's a lot of them out there. And some of the 360-degree video cameras have been companies that have raised a lot of money just by basically taking GoPros, putting a rubber band around them, and going out there and raising about $100 million. A company called Jaunt did this, and now they have a 24 camera rig that's a very sophisticated piece. And there's a lot of 360 video production going on, which we just did with Clace and in the context of this video. Now, one of the things I'm part of doing is, I believe in this next several year period, we really need to set context. We need to have a context for this because, as an example, no one here has actually experienced VR. So, but yet you could go out and read how many articles about it? Many, many, many. They're out there all the time. So the idea of setting what this medium is and getting people to understand what it is and what its power can be, I think is very, very important. So me as a storyteller, that's what I'm focused on. So everything I'm doing, whether it be the video with Clace, I also have a show being developed with an HBO producer who's part of Entourage and Ballers, Rob Weiss. And this is a show that's going to have a VR component. It's about virtual reality. It's called The Futurist. And in the context, the lead character in that show is a man who's essentially the Steve Jobs of VR. And he's created this idea of 5 laws of VR. And I've just recently written and published these 5 laws of VR, which I've done in a fictional context because I'm a storyteller. I don't do them with complete seriousness. A bit of irony is there. But are those of you science fiction readers at all, do you know Isaac Asimov? Any of you know who Isaac Asimov was? He wrote a lot of amazing science fiction books. He wrote one called I, Robot, and in this is many years ago, 40, 50 years ago, he wrote the 3 laws of robotics. Well, those 3 laws of robotics are being used for real in the robotics industry. but he wrote them in a fictional context. So I thought, as an homage to Isaac Asimov, I'm going to write my 5 laws of VR, again, in a fictional context. The reason for that is to, again, create context and to get the discussion going around an ethical framework for this medium that's about to take over so many things in world culture, way beyond what we can imagine right now, because it becomes the interface. As a matter of fact, Goldman Sachs came out with an analysis about a month ago where they said that virtual reality and artificial and augmented reality, VR and AR, are going to be bigger than the launch of the PC, of the personal computer. That it's not just about a peripheral, it's not about a new display, it's not about a mouse, it's about something that's completely a new device, a new medium for us to engage with data and engage with each other. So it really has got a lot of potential for being something really positive, but I think we have to, from the very beginning, talk about it and really get those discussions going. So part of what I've wanting to do in creating the 5 laws of VR is get that discussion going. So my first law of VR is take it seriously. Do not underestimate the ability for virtual reality to affect actual reality. The second law is that it has to be a medium about interconnectivity to people, and that it cannot be something that creates greater alienation than our digital devices already have done. Because there's already a lot of controversy about how much alienation, how much sort of distance we've created between each other because of the use of digital devices. Now there's a lot of different ways of talking about that. This is a dialectic and a conversation I have with my son a lot, because he lives the digital lifestyle. He's a millennial, so he lives those devices, and you can look at it both from a positive and a negative standpoint depending on how, but I think this is important to have this discussion. My third law is that the laws and rules of VR have to be organic to the medium itself. We cannot impose laws from other versions of reality, because virtual reality will be completely mutable. You're going to be able to change how you appear, what your digital identity is, and the way in which your environment is at basically a thought eventually. And so we have to use that paradigm in order to create the rules or the foundation for the medium. My fourth law is that it has to be the ultimate safe space for ideas, even dangerous ones. Because I believe this is a medium that can really be the final, or not final, but at least one of the greater expressions of the human imagination. That we can actually interact with each other in ways that are completely beyond our comprehension from what has happened before. Some of the ideas that are dangerous that are being used in virtual reality, as an example, are things that are involved with healing people. Soldiers with PTSD, there's a whole program going on in the States using virtual reality as a way of healing them from PTSD from their warfare, from their war experiences, and it's working. So that's a really weird, interesting idea that also has an efficacy and has now shown itself to be something that's a positive force. Here in Scandinavia, I believe in Norway, there are researchers working with pedophiles and virtual reality. Now, this is truly dangerous ideas, and definitely wouldn't happen in the States. No way, because there's so many buttons being pushed about that. But there is there's a percentage of people that are wired this way, and so they're studying their brain chemistry based upon putting them in a virtual environment. And what they found is they can disconnect the hunting urge of a pedophile by putting them in environments that show them what the effect of their actions are. And so that is, again, in some cultures, a very dangerous idea of how to use VR. I think these are the things we have to use VR for. We have to go and do the research on things that we would not be able to do in real reality, because VR becomes, again, the ultimate safe space for the expression of ideas, even dangerous ones. And then my final law of virtual reality is that it has to become the medium of what Joseph Campbell called the global human. The idea that we are not just people from different countries or different cultures, that we are actually all one people that are on this globe, and the interconnectivity between us and the interconnectivity between cultures is the thing we must celebrate and also magnify and amplify with a technology like this. Because if we don't do that, it can become the most alienating and also mind-controlling medium in the history of humankind. And that is a very, very daunting and scary idea. And so some of the things I'm doing in the storytelling I'm doing are around those ideas, showing the possible negatives and then also expressing the possible positives. But by getting out there and getting the discussion going, I will tell you that the millennials that are involved with VR, I go and I speak at a lot of VR conferences these days, they really understand that this is something that's an important medium, that the stakes are high, that they have to get engaged with these conversations now at the beginning before it's just completely part of our daily lives. Because once that happens, it's very hard to roll back and deal with some of these issues. So as a storyteller, I feel a platonic responsibility to deal with these issues because I did before. And now I've experienced all these people that are making these giant companies actually took the idea from my movie and are doing it. And it's suddenly you realize you actually do affect things by telling stories. So we need to tell stories that create a context for this. That's what I believe Hollywood 2.0 is going to be about. It's going to be about realizing that these mediums have an interconnectivity to global culture and to something that is more important than just entertainment. And when it's a medium that changes your brain chemistry, that hardwires your mind, we better push it in this direction. We better at least have the discussion. I don't believe in censorship in any way, shape, or form, by the way. I'm talking about creating a discussion around an ethical framework of how to create VR as creators, and at least engage in that dialectic, as opposed to shoving it under the table. A great quote from early Hollywood, Harry Cohn, who was one of the original big moguls of Hollywood, said, if you've got a message, send it Western Union, right? So it's like, don't make movies about ideas. Make them just about entertainment. That's not true. That's never been the case. And in VR, it's going to be something even more important. So these are the things that I think that are happening simultaneously as the business model of Hollywood 1.0 is changing into the business model of Hollywood 2.0, which is the business model of Hollywood 1.0 was basically based on the tenets of organized crime. I know. I've had about $500 million of box office. I've followed the money. I can see where it went. And it is not an egalitarian system at all. Let me tell you that right now. With these new mediums and with the new generation that's creating these new mediums, there is an understanding that they want the business model to be something different. They want it to support actual research and development of how powerful and how interesting this medium can become. So there's a real disruption going on right now. Digital disintermediation, the ability to bring your content directly to people, and the ability to do it beyond cultural barriers. Some of the most interesting things that are being done in VR right now are around this idea of experiencing another culture. So in America, we have a lot of prejudice about Muslims, right? Stupid, because obviously it's, the prejudice is based on fear. So a woman named Anina de la Pina has created a VR experience that's in a marketplace in Syria during the war aspect. And you hear the bombs going off, and but you're engaging with people in the marketplace. And what happens for people that see this, and this is mainly based for Americans to realize these are just human beings, just like we are. They go and they buy food. They have children. It's not some other form of humanity that has to be thought of in a different way. And people, because VR is such an intimate medium, it's different than watching shadows on a screen. It's something where you actually feel an emotional or empathetic connection to people. As a matter of fact, one of the people that is creating content, Chris Milk, a very interesting young filmmaker who's working in VR right now, he calls VR the empathy machine because you instantly have a greater empathy. One of the most interesting experiments that I've heard about that's happened was with gamers. Okay, now gamers, they do point and shoot stuff all the time. So they're going in there and basically doing virtual murder all day long, right? And they're inured to it. It's not something that really affects them. They did this experiment where they created a virtual room like this one, and on the table is a gun. And you walk in with the headset on, and you're able to walk over to the table, and there's a controller device that looks kind of like this, right? And you're able to pick up the controller device, and it looks like a gun in your hand in the thing. And the idea is take the gun, put it to your head, and pull the trigger. And all these gamers who are hardcore gamers that, do point and shoot all day long said, no problem, this is cake, no worry at all. 80% of them got to about here and started having a breakdown. Literally started having shaking and not being able to do it. The few 20% that took it all the way there that was being hardcore have had nightmares that have gone on for months and a kind of PTSD reaction to it. Because VR is different than other mediums. It is intimate. It tells our brain that we actually are there. The autonomic nervous system is actually engaged in a way that is not the fact when you're leaning back and eating popcorn and watching a movie. We have a distance to the medium. This has no distance to it. And there's a whole generation that want no distance to their expression of media. They want to be part of it. They want to be inside it. And that's a very, very unique thing that's happening. So we have to be aware again that these kinds of experiments with this gun show that the stakes are high. I was talking about the 360 camera thing. One of the technologies that's about to erupt is something called light field cameras. There's a company out there called Lytro. Have any of you heard of this yet? Okay, well, this is a camera. It's about the size of this table here. It's very big, very clunky. But it takes and absorbs the data of a room like this and anyone in it. So it's not even photography. It's something different. It's the next thing that's going to supplant and take over for photography. And it absorbs a data cloud that we then are able to take into a workstation environment and allow someone then to navigate through it in a totally realistically looking environment. So it has the realism of photography with the agency of computer graphic rendered images. And there's several cameras happening. There's actually one that a company I'm working with called Nomoko that's in Switzerland, of course, Swiss watchmakers making these little tiny, very, very intense devices. And they have this thing that basically absorbs reality and creates it into a point cloud that has a resolution of 40K resolution. Our HD has 4K resolution, so 10 times the resolution of an HD image. So it allows us to be able to, I could start with a camera in the middle of your eye, pull out, come over here, go to a close-up of everybody here, come up, go to this, and being able to do that all day long, and be able to do that in a virtual reality headset, and be able to completely interact with everybody in that space in the idea of true 3 dimensions. And that is a technology that within the next year is going to start taking over what photography is. So the idea that, all the technology that made Hollywood 1.0 is going away. It's actually going to be the past very soon. And this whole new way of doing things is going to take it over. And this new way creates a kind of medium that is truly revolutionary. So it's something we have to, I think, continue to have a discussion about. And actually, being in a different culture actually has been great to get out of the good old US of A right now, because there's some things going on there that are pretty disgusting. One starts with a T. So being in a socialist democracy has been a great breath of fresh air for me over the last couple of weeks. And actually feeling here, this idea of the global human is actually something that's at the core of your culture more than it is at the core of my culture. And I really think that that's important, that we learn things from each different culture about these new mediums and engage that conversation to really have a multicultural, multidisciplinary approach to it. Because without that, VR is going to be one of the most multidisciplinary mediums in history. It makes making a feature film, a giant visual effects oriented feature film, look like nothing at all. It's very, very complex. I'm working with a man named Alex McDowell he runs the USC World Building Lab at the USC Film School in California. And he was the production designer of Minority Report, many other films by Steven Spielberg and David Fincher, and happened to get his start on my film, The Lawnmower Man. So we started with VR together. We're now working together again. And his whole idea is that scripts go away. There's no scripts anymore. There's no way of building things in this linear fashion that we've done before. We actually have to build a world at the level of Tolkien and beyond. Like Tolkien wrote 5 languages to create his world for those books. We actually have to create something beyond that in terms of its density and in terms of its complexity in order for there to be infinite story threads that can work within a story world being created with this new medium. So back to 360. So because light field cameras don't work yet, they're going to work soon. The Litro actually is working, but it's very clunky and very big and a whole lot of data to deal with. We have to deal with the data aspects of this are one of the biggest technical challenges we're going to be facing. So 360 is the way we can approximate the virtual reality experience now. And so in doing the music video with Claes and his song Catch on Fire, we had a young man named Alex Pierce, who is a new generation of filmmaker who started in traditional cinema and realized, just like many are, Hollywood 1.0 is going away. He wanted to be part of Hollywood 2.0, so he started getting into 360. And he was able to, while we were creating a traditional music video, we were creating a 360 experience as well. Now, what we have of this are just raw images. Nothing's been edited. There's no sound design. So this is as rough as it gets. But this gives you a feeling for how we're working with some of these new technologies in order to approximate a VR experience. You'll be able to, when this is put together, put on a headset and look around and actually see everything in 360, up and down. This set of the Oddfell Palais, where they had the staircase, is a very nice vertical set. So you actually are able to look way up and way down, and it gives a tremendous experience of 360 video virtual reality, which is, again, I believe, a phase that's going to be going beyond, but it is what we're at right now. So we're experimenting with it, and we did, and so Claes wanted to show you some of these images. And then after that, I'll show you, I'm going to show you a little 2-minute teaser for the other film I'm developing called Lawnmower Man Reborn, which is the follow-up to Lawnmower Man, but it actually is going to be created in virtual reality first. Pierce Brosnan's involved like he was in the first one. And it's going to be a very different kind of feature film because it's going to actually have virtual environments that then lead to a feature film where the feature film puts the narrative pieces together of the virtual environments that go on before it.